There are two foundational baselines that have to happen. So the first baseline is self-awareness. You're only going to be able to improve and stay on top of your game if you're consistently and constantly reflecting, evaluating, and pivoting to improve. And then the second baseline is confidence. This is the theme. This is what this whole podcast is about. Confidence in yourself, confidence in your product, confidence in your industry, confidence in your ability to provide value to your clients. So now that we have those two baselines, we could get into the 3 easy habits that cultivate that rockstar energy. Hello, and welcome to Prospecting on Purpose. It is hard to believe, but this is the 50th episode of the show. And after 50 episodes, I am still learning a lot about this whole podcasting thing. But one of the coolest things is that I'm starting to understand the data behind it. For example, I've shared recently that this show now ranks in the top 3% of all global podcasts. What does that mean? Well, according to a platform called Listen Notes, 3% of 3,227,546 podcasts are out in the world globally. So Prospecting on Purpose is now in the top 3%. A sincere thank you to you, listener, for contributing to that success. 2024, we gotta go for it. We're going to the top 1%. And then for this episode, as a little celebration episode, I want to share a quick behind the scenes on how an episode is created because I get a lot of questions about that. I want to do a roundup of the top 5 most popular solo episodes based on the data. If you've listened to every episode, this will be a really nice refresher of the greatest hits. And then if you're newer to the show, or if this is the first episode you're listening to, it's a really great starting point because you can kind of get a theme of the big takeaways from those episodes. So just a little behind the scenes detail. For the solo episodes, I write them ahead of time and I record it on Zoom. The reason I use Zoom is that it records the video component for the YouTube episodes, and then of course, promotional clips and snippets there. And then I used to edit the show myself, but between writing, recording, editing, and uploading, it was just such a significant time commitment. So I now work with a production team. They edit the episode and then they upload it to our podcast host. There are many out there. I use one called Libsyn. And so the audio file and the show notes, all of that is uploaded onto Libsyn. And then that generates an RSS feed. RSS stands for Really Simple Syndication. The show is then linked from Libsyn to all of the different streaming platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, so on. And then those platforms pull the audio file onto their service via the RSS feed. So that part is actually surprisingly easy, but creating the content is the time-consuming piece, as you can imagine. And then between Libsyn and Apple Podcasts, I'm able to pull some pretty solid data on where in the globe the audience is listening, which episodes perform best, and then which are the most popular. So I want to give a quick shout out to the city of Seattle, Washington in the United States. That is one of the most engaged audiences. So shout out and hello to my friends in Seattle. I appreciate you. And then in determining which top 5 solo episodes were the most popular, I'm using 2 metrics. The first is the number of plays. So that's either by listeners, that subscribe to the show, sharing it, or people finding it in a search feature. And then the second metric I'm using is which episodes get played all the way through. There's a percentage calculator there on how far people get in the episode as an average. And then that is considered the engagement rate and the listenability data point there. I'll run through the top 5 episodes first, and then I'm going to give a brief little Cliff's Notes version of each episode. If you haven't listened to all of these, I encourage you to go back because there's obviously a lot more takeaways in the full episodes. They all range from about 11 minutes to 18 minutes, I think is the longest out of these 5. I will link them in the show notes as well. So these top 5 episodes in the order of popularity are episode 20, 4 Pillars for a Confident Mindset, episode 13, Volleyball, Velociraptors, and Overcoming Objections, episode 7, 4 Foundations for a Growth Mindset, episode 21, The Art of Relationship Building in Business, and then episode 2, 3 Habits to be a Rockstar Salesperson. So diving into each of these, starting with episode 20, 4 Pillars for a Confident Mindset. I started this episode by giving a brief explanation of the differences between confidence, arrogance, and ego. And in short, confidence is feeling sure of yourself and your abilities, not in an arrogant way, but in a realistic, secure way. It's a quiet inner knowing that you're capable. The 4 pillars for a confident mindset are understanding our values, If we understand our values, then we naturally have the confidence that the actions that we take are in alignment with our core values. Additionally, if we know our values, then we're more secure in our decisions and we don't spend that time second guessing. Second pillar of a confident mindset is understanding our core competencies. What are our personal strengths that set us apart from others? Some examples here would be, are you a team player? Are you a problem solver? Strong negotiator? Organized? Decisive? Flexible? Accountable? Creative? Motivator? Good listener? Etc., right? What are your strengths? And understanding of those is going to combine with the first pillar to get to our third pillar here. The third pillar is paying attention to internal and external dialogue. And so one of the ways that we can do this internally, if we're starting to have negative self-talk, is to take a script from the first two pillars. So the script is, I value blank, pull from your values list, and my core competencies are blank. Pull from your strengths. So if you're stressing out about something, an upcoming meeting, an incoming call from your boss, worrying or being anxious about that is wasted energy. If you can replace it with, I value attention to detail and my core competency is organization, then the way you show up in that meeting and that conversation is going to naturally be more confident. There are quite a few examples, more examples on the full episode here, but that should give you a quick idea. And then the final pillar of confidence is cultivating a strong relationship with ourselves. And of course, that includes inner dialogue, because if we're constantly speaking to ourselves and telling ourselves that we're losers or we're incompetent, we're hurting the relationship with ourselves, but that's going to outwardly reflect in our confidence to others. The way we establish genuine, impactful, and confident relationships with others is first and foremost having a nice relationship with ourselves. Next up, episode 13, volleyball, velociraptors, and overcoming objections. If we can understand our most frequent objections and be prepared in our responses, or sometimes proactively address those concerns before the customer brings it up, it allows us to stay on the offensive and we remain in control of the sale. It also proves to our clients that we're experts in our industries, and now we're using objections as an expression of our expertise. So once we really perfect this, we fall in love with that challenge. You'll have to listen to the episode to get the Velociraptor reference, but in a nutshell, I like to think about navigating a sales process or a sales meeting like a game of volleyball. So our clients are serving us those objections and we're able to just return that volley right over the net. And in the episode, we break down 6 steps. Step 1 is confidence. Varsity players want the ball to come to them. Step 2 is asking questions and then listening to the hidden concerns in the client's answers so that we can address them. Number 3 is, of course, keep an ongoing internal list of common objections that you get and what return volleys use that work best for you. And this is a little internal cheat sheet. You can study it. It's a dynamic document. It's going to evolve over time, but that's a huge piece there, is to keep that running list. Step 4, if we can't fix that objection, try to feature it and weaving it into the client's business model. Step 5 is to incorporate storytelling of your common objections to stay on the offensive. So if we share a story that proactively addresses an objection without the client bringing it up, it's going to easily keep us in the driver's seat because we identified it, addressed it, and moved on. And then finally, step 6, we let those velociraptors test the fence. This is a Jurassic Park reference here. Our confidence is all that's being tested when we get those pings, and we've already handled that in step 1. Okay, a recap of episode 7, 4 foundations for a growth mindset. This topic is very near to my heart, and I love that it's one of the most popular episodes. I encourage you to listen to the whole episode. It's only 14 minutes long, but as an overview, the 4 foundations for a growth mindset are: 1, embrace change. It's the only constant in our life. And so that first foundation requires us to embrace change for continued expansion. And if we can view change in the unknown as a fun lens, I have a reference in the full episode about the amusement park of life. We're just getting on different rides. It ensures that we stay present while taking steps towards our ideal futures. So number 1 of this foundation here is to embrace and love change. Number 2, this is a reoccurring theme here. Pay attention to your inner dialogue, because really the thoughts that we say in our heads result in the feelings we feel and the actions that we take. So if there's a thought or a pattern of behavior that we don't like, the first step we have to change that is in our brains. So paying attention to our inner dialogue is so important if we want to continue to have that growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. Step number 3 here is we need to view it from another perspective, because really everyone has their own lens of reality. And this concept of viewing something from another perspective has changed my life. If we can view things from only our own perspective, we're always going to be seeing the situation from a fixed mindset. But if we view it from other perspectives, it dissolves egos and it instills empathy, which helps us collaborate when we're confronted with challenges. And then number 4 for a growth mindset is we have to be taking action. Action equals growth. We will never be complete and done. It's constant development. Taking action is forward motion, and that forward motion can include major successes or mistakes or confrontational situations. But the art of taking action is the through line that continues to help us practice these first 3 foundations for that growth mindset. Our next popular episode is episode 21, The Art of Relationship Building in Business. It is my favorite episode. It's what I send out the most to people when I'm introducing them to the show, or if I need them to reference stuff as part of our work that we're doing together. It's a large part of what I teach in my workshops and developing those softer skills. I personally think the number 1 factor in success is around mastering the art of relationship building, authentic relationship building, because that establishes a foundation for our business efforts, and then the business exchange becomes more organic and more seamless. I get into this more in the 16-minute episode, but as an overview here, to quickly establish relationships with your prospects before soliciting their business, we need to bridge the gap. GAP is an acronym. It stands for genuine interest. So we need to focus on being interested as opposed to interesting. We need to listen actively. We need to focus when people tell us their names. We need to be present during our discussions as opposed to planning our own introductions or vetting the person in our heads to see if they're worth our time. We need to use icebreakers. That's one easy way we can establish genuine interest. And then we actively listen to those answers, which drives us to step 2 in this bridge the gap framework. The A stands for authentic relationship building. True connection can only happen if authenticity is present. We need to be cool. That does not mean sporting great fashion or having 20,000 LinkedIn followers. Being cool as a sales professional is really someone who energizes others as opposed to drain others. And when we do this first step of genuine interest, being someone who energizes happens naturally. We all know that people do business with people that they like. And the biggest way to be likable is being cool, being our authentic self, and embracing our favorite acronym, ABAV, always be adding value. So then once we have this genuine interest, we've established an authentic relationship. Now we get to the P, this final piece of the framework, which leads to prized clients or prized relationships. And this is where we can start to ask for things because we've built that initial base of trust and understanding. It's a lot easier to get the ask. So asking for a meeting, asking for a presentation request, asking for an introduction to somebody else, all of this becomes significantly easier and more organic if you've taken the time to focus on those first 2 steps. Business becomes more seamless with collaborative relationships, and it propels us forward with that strong foundation throughout the rest of the sales process. So bridging that gap is super important. We get into it in a lot more detail in episode 21. So that wraps up our Bridging the Gap framework. We get into a lot more details on it in episode 21. So go back and take a listen if you haven't checked that episode out. And then episode 2 is our 5th most popular episode. It is the 3 habits of a rockstar salesperson. And before we get into those 3 habits, there are 2 foundational baselines that have to happen. So the first baseline is self-awareness. You're only going to be able to improve and stay on top of your game if you're consistently and constantly reflecting, evaluating, and pivoting to improve. And then the second baseline is confidence. This is the theme. This is what this whole podcast is about. Confidence in yourself, confidence in your product, confidence in your industry, confidence in your ability to provide value to your clients. So now that we have those 2 baselines, we can get into the 3 easy habits that cultivate that rockstar energy. First habit is to always ask questions and listen. Prep work, of course, is important because that's going to give you the baseline of confidence going into your meeting. But the way that the business exchange is driven forward is making sure you're on the same page as your client. And you can't do that if you're not asking questions. Oftentimes, I think people assume that if we ask questions, it's going to appear that we may not know what we're talking about or we didn't do our prep work. But I promise you, your clients are going to appreciate it. You're going to maximize the meeting. You're going to get the most out of that meeting, and your relationship is going to deepen. And it's so simple as just asking the right questions and then listening to the answer. The second habit here is to admit when we don't know something. And this really does go hand in hand with questions, but I think people really struggle with this. And there's a lot of power in showing your vulnerability. And really, it's not even vulnerability, it's just honesty. When you're honest with your client, it builds trust. And I know we like that phrase, fake it till you make it. I use it a lot too, but it's okay that you don't know something about your client's business. It's their business. It would be weird if you knew everything about their business. So it's okay that you don't. And if you ask questions and admit that you don't know something, that's how you can start to establish confidence in the fact that, yeah, maybe I don't know that answer, but I'm willing to figure it out in partnership with you. It's easy to pivot to, you know what? That's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Let me get back to you. Can I clarify why you're asking? I'm not sure. Let me find out and get back to you. And then that gives you an opportunity to follow up, reach back out, and prove that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And then the third habit is find support in areas where you slip. For the bigger stuff that may require coaching or personal development programs, investing in seminars or reading books, outsourcing tasks if that's in your wheelhouse or budget. But then for the little stuff, like you hate checking your voicemail, you hate using your CRM system, what can you do to work around it? Can you use an app? Can you hire a virtual assistant? Can you gamify it to ensure that you're focusing on areas that are in your zone of genius and outsourcing and getting support in other areas where you struggle? Really, at the end of the day, this is about problem solving. If you don't know how to do something, that is okay. But finding the right resources to help you solve it and figure it out is what's going to make you a rockstar salesperson. And then as two honorable mentions that were in the top 10 episodes, but I see shared pretty frequently, is episode 25, The Importance of Remembering Names. It's a great one and it has a lot of good tips if that's an area where you struggle. It's only about 15 minutes. And then episode 4, Why Icebreakers Are Important in Prospecting. This one is a short 12-minute episode. It's fun and it's going to get you to think in different ways. I get a lot of feedback on this one and how they use icebreakers in different ways outside of a sales capacity. So take a listen. Let me know your thoughts. You're going to have to let me know what you think the best bird is. And that joke will make sense if you listen to that episode. And then just to wrap us up here on episode 50, I just want to say thanks so much for listening to this and being an engaged listener of this show. Your subscription, your listens, your streams, your rating, your reviews, all of that has gotten us this far. And I'm so appreciative of it. I hope that this episode serves as a nice recap and a nice place to start. If someone's new to the show, please share this episode with your colleagues, families, and friends if you think they'd benefit from it. Next week, I'm going to do a recap of the biggest takeaways and learnings from all of the 2023 guests that we've had on the show this year. We've had some amazing guests. I know those episodes are a longer time commitment, so I'm going to break down my biggest takeaways and how I've used what I've learned from the guests throughout the year in my personal life and then in the business. So please be sure to tune in. It's going to be a special episode as we round out this 2023 year. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.